Ready to start? Anytime.
Perfect. Great. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to this workshop on copyright. And I am going to turn it over to Michael from the library, and he's going to get us started.
All right. So yes, thank you, Teresa. Thanks for having me. Welcome, everyone. My name is Michael Larish. I'm the Scholarly Communications Officer at UC Davis Library, responsible not only for the Davis campus, but also for the Sacramento campus. I do provide support for faculty and students in questions about publishing, open access publishing mainly, bibliometrics, but also copyright. And this is what I want to talk about today, about copyright, fair use in relation to thesis and dissertations. And at the end, I will also touch on some issues that are not directly copyright, but somehow related, and questions that I get quite often from graduate students in relation to their thesis. So I want to share my screen. Let me see how this works. Here, and now I'm gonna minimize this here a little bit. And I hope everybody's seeing my screen. So this talk is being recorded, and we just decided also to put the slides that you will see on the Graduate Studies website. So you can later on go there and check out the links that are available and read through the text, because this is very text heavy. So you don't have to read everything that I show you. I don't want to read everything. It will take too much time. But you can go there any time and double check things that you're most interested in. I also need to say that I'm of course available for consultations, for questions that you may have later on in response to this talk, but also in general, things that come up later on. So my contact details are at the last slide. You can find me on the UC Davis Library website as well. And I'm happy to talk to you and give you some advice as good as I can about copyright issues. So the first slide is a disclaimer. So I'm not an attorney. I don't provide legal advice. This is simply for educating you about copyright and related issues. To the best of my knowledge, and so on and so on. That's something you need to do, you need to know, and I need to say every time I have a talk like this. So I'm not an attorney, I don't provide legal advice. This is the outline. So these are the topics I will touch on or go in a little bit more detail. A general overview of copyright law, fair use doctrine, obtaining permissions, then open access policies is quite important and something relatively new here. And then copyright about and your thesis and dissertation. So a mixed bag of questions that I will answer. So the copyright law, the US copyright law, is in effect since January 1978. It is a federal law. That's important to know. So every lawsuit that is being filed in relation to copyright law is in federal court. There are state copyright laws as well, but they're not as relevant for the issues that we are really dealing with. So it's all on the federal level, district court and up to the Supreme Court. There's a link down there to the whole code. So if you are interested in reading the law, just go there. So it's all available online, of course. The copyright law is protecting work that is being created. So it's the creator of work is being protected, and not everyone can use this work without permission and do whatever they want with it. but the major reason for the law is to promote progress of science and the useful arts. So this is basically a sort of a contract, similar to the patent law, where the law gives protection to a creator, which is at the same time an incentive to do something, to create something, to invent something, and so on. But this also means that society can use and is encouraged actually to build freely upon the ideas and information conveyed by a work. So that's a little bit of an idea behind the copyright law in general. What is protected under copyright law? Literary work, so this is what everybody thinks first time, at first when copyright law is being mentioned. Then of course, musical works, dramatic works, pictorial graphics, so this photography comes in here. So your snapshot of squirrels on Davis campus is immediately protected. The moment you put something, fix something in a tangible medium of expression, as it's called in the law. So that means ideas that you have in your head and maybe talk to your friends about it are not protected by copyright law, but the moment you write them down in an email, publish it in a paper, put it on PowerPoint slides and so on, automatically you are the copyright holder of that. Then motion pictures, sound recordings, of course, are protected by copyright. And these are very important pieces because there are very powerful industries behind them who trying to shape the copyright law and lobby Congress and so on for changes, usually more restrictive because they, of course, want to profit from their works, or from the works that they have copyright on there, so they're not necessarily the creator. I have a note here, say beware of layers. So whenever you think about copyright, is this who's the copyright holder and so on, that some works can have layers. So you can have a photograph, which is usually then the photographer's copyright, but it could have photographed copyrighted material. Recorded music is the great mess because you can have many layers of copyright. So somebody wrote the lyrics, another person composed the music, and then there's the recording itself that have a copyright. So I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but this is something to always keep in mind. It's not just straight one person or one entity who's owning copyright. What's not protected is ideas, procedures, process, and so on. Facts are not protected. So if you measure the temperature outside, 50 degrees Fahrenheit, you write it down, that's not copyright, not copyrighted. But if you create a nice graph with some images around it and whatnot, then you put it down on a tangible medium, then you have to copyright to this particular graph or illustration, not to the fact that it's 50 degrees Fahrenheit. Words and phrases are not covered by copyright and works by the US government. On the right-hand side, you see links to important copyright cases, landmark cases that you, I recommend going there at some point to look why the Supreme Court or the District Court has granted the fair use doctrine, for example, and an exception for copyright law, or not granted in specific cases. These are quite interesting cases, and they are being used usually in court trials for as guidance on how to decide specific cases. Then work in the public domain are not protected. So these are works that are published before 1925 or have for some other reasons no copyright protections. And you can use them anytime in your dissertation, when you teach, upload them to a Canvas or whatever, or in other publications. The duration copyright 70 years, the life of the author per 70 years, and for corporations it's even a little bit longer. This was extended in 1998. The act is nicknamed the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. It's a fun fact because Disney pushed back then to extend the copyright for creations because the copyright for the Mickey Mouse character was about to expire. So they were quite successful, but it expires in 2024. But you can see here that the powerful corporations have sometimes the ability to lobby Congress in a way that changes the copyright. But this is where we are now here. The copyright law provides exclusive rights for copyrighted works. So the copyright holder can make copies of the work, make derivatives of the work, so that meaning translations of a work, or create an audio book out of a novel, for example. That's things that the copyright holder can do. Distribute, sell it, give it away for free if they want to, perform for music or films, display the work for photographs and paintings and so on. But the copyright owner also may transfer some or all of these rights to others. And this is the case, very often the case, when you publish an article or a book chapter and so on, that the publisher will ask you to transfer the exclusive copyright to them. And in most cases, of course, you do this because otherwise you won't be published. It's a little bit a trend of to let authors keep their copyright, especially when it comes to open access publishing. But in a traditional publishing, usually the publisher wants to be the copyright holder. And of course, then in the contract, it's being laid out how the creator, the author, is being rewarded by royalties. So for books, for articles and journals, rather not. The most important limitations to these exclusive rights that copyright holders have is the fair use doctrine. And you probably all heard about it one way or the other. So under the fair use doctrine, people are allowed to use copyrighted work without the permission of the copyright holder for specific purposes. And this is here criticism, teaching, scholarship, research. So we are very well placed in higher education and research institution to use the fair use doctrine, because that's what we use material for. But in general, in order to apply fair use, the person who wants to use this material should look at the so-called 4 factors of fair use. And I go through them in detail in a minute. No, in a few seconds. So fair use is without the fair use doctrine, all copyright for any purpose without permission would be infringement. So that's not desirable. That would not be in the sense of the copyright, meaning providing progress in science and useful arts and so on. Fair use is very vague. It's intentionally vague, which can be frustrating, but it's not giving you a specific number of pages you can copy and put up on Canvas, for example, or the number of chapters. And there are always numbers floating around. And in my life as a librarian in different libraries, I heard a whole range of numbers. 10% is fine, or 20% is fine. This is not from the copyright law. These are numbers that somebody made up. It's not like traffic law where you drive 65 miles per hour on the freeway, and if you drive 66, you break the law. So there's not such a clear number in copyright law. There are other exceptions, by the way, for the copyright law. Fair use is the most significant, but there are exceptions for libraries. So we are allowed to make copies for interlibrary loan, for example. There are exceptions for people with disabilities. You can create, for example, an audio version of a book without asking for permission if you if you cannot read. Then there are no quantitative limits or absolutes. That's something I mentioned already. And no one factor is deciding, and every case is different. So that's why it is vague, because every case that you look at has some specific features, and you need to look at all the 4 factors in order to decide if this is fair use. The fourth factor, the first factor, first factor of the four factors is the purpose and the character of the use. And here we are good. Again, higher education and research, because we apply fair use doctrine for scholarly or educational purposes. So this is pretty good. And it's also usually not for profit, which is also leaning towards fair use. So it's leaning towards it. That's important, and leaning away from fair use. So use is for profit, for example, leaning away. But it's not always. It can be still a fair use case, even if it is for profit. So the example that I have here, Billy Graham versus Dorling Kindersley, is a good example. Dorling Kindersley is a publisher who wanted to publish a book about the Grateful Dead, the famous rock band from the Bay Area, and a history about them. And they wanted to publish in the book, they wanted to reprint some of their concert posters, which were back in the 60s were wonderful art, and they're really valuable collectibles now. And Bill Graham was the archivist for the Grateful Dead, and he said, no, you cannot do this. And so they sued. And the federal court decided, yes, it is fair use, because the purpose of the poster is no longer there, which was announcing a concert that was long in the past. And also, it is not an infringement on the copyright, because they use only a small image in their book, which is not an equivalent to the full poster. So this means this is a use for profit that is still was allowed under the fair use doctrine. The second factor is the nature of the copyrighted work. And here, this is the least important one. Leaning towards fair use is work that has been published and work that is factual based. So all scholarly works usually leaning more towards fair use. More creative expressions, music, film, literature, poetry, and so on, is leaning away from fair use. But of course, if you are doing a course on American contemporary poetry, then you have to use this material. You use it in a different way for a different purpose. But then even the second factor, the nature of the copyrighted work, can allow the fair use, even if it is a more creative expression. The third one, the amount and substantiality of the use is important. It's always good to use as little as possible, only as much as you need to achieve the stated purpose of your goal of teaching a student, or make your point and your argument in an article or in a book, for example. The portion is not the heart of the work. It's very fair use leaning, but sometimes you need to use the heart of the work. And the heart of the work is something like what in film reviews you would say the spoiler, where you use the end of a detective novel, for example, with the solution. If you use this is certainly the heart of the work, and this is leaning away from fair use. But once again, if you have a course on crime novels from Scandinavia, then of course you need the art of the work as well. So it's really, you can see every case can be somehow different, really depending on what you're doing with this material. And the last one, a very important one, of course, is the effect on the potential market. This means that the copyright holder wants to profit somehow from the work, and if your use is somehow reducing or potentially reducing the profit that the copyright holder is making from their works, then it might not be permissible under fair use. So in other words, if you copy a textbook several times and distribute it to your students so they don't have to buy the textbook, the students will be probably happy, but you are certainly infringing the copyright and get in problems because the publisher, as the copyright holder, usually wants to sell the textbooks to the individual students. So these are the four factors, and these apply, you can apply them to material that you want to use in teaching. Again, what can you distribute in a classroom? What can you put up on Canvas? But also for publishing books, articles, and your thesis and dissertation, of course. So here are a few more tips that you could read through and think about. And if you have time, I would recommend downloading this little booklet here from the Authors Alliance, which is a nonprofit organization for mainly non-fictional authors. They put this little brochure together, and it's quite nicely explains what I told you now in a little bit more detailed form, and it's you can download it for free there, so that's fine. So for authors also, the fair use, you can use the fair use doctrine in order to use material in your article or in a book, but the publisher still might ask you for getting permissions from the copyright holder. And because the publisher calls the shots, you know, so she decides, okay, I want the permission because the publishers are more careful. They don't want to have any trouble, and they ask the authors to obtain permissions from the copyright holder. So material that you might have used in your dissertation, for example, under the fair use doctrine, and would be fine. You might, if you want to reuse it in a book that you later publish or in an article, then you might need to get permission from the copyright holder. So this is a relatively straightforward process, because you just got to contact the copyright holder and send them an email. And down below here, you see a template from the University of Texas on how such a letter could be composed. And you get a written statement from the copyright holder, yes, you can use this for this and this purpose, and that's fine. However, they might also say no, or they might say, yeah, you can use it, but you pay us a certain fee for that. Or they might not respond, or you might not be able to find out who the copyright holder is, because it's not always easy to find them. Once you have them for publication or for material that comes out of other publications, books or art journal articles, it's usually the publisher. So every big publisher has some contact options on their website for to get permissions for usage of their material. So that's relatively easy. But in some cases, you might not find that. You might not find the copyright holder. And then there's not much you can do. So if you're required to obtain permission and you can't, then you can argue with the fair use options. But if the publisher that's supposed to publish your article or book insist on the permissions, then there's not much you can do about it. You can use alternative material. And if the copyright owner cannot be identified in what we call orphan works, sometimes that's a big issue in libraries, that there's a book or some material website or whatever, and you just don't know who's the copyright holder. And it could be this older material that is still under copyright by law, so post 1925. But who knows, the copyright holder might be have passed away, or the copyrights are being sold and nobody really knows about it. So in these cases, you cannot really do much about it than using alternative material. Now we're going slightly away from the copyright law and the copyright issue. And I want to point you to the UC policy on open access for thesis and dissertations. It's relatively new. Well, relatively, it's in effective since March last year. This covers all theses and dissertations that are being written or in UC on UC campuses. And it asked or requires graduate students grants to the university a worldwide non-exclusive license to exercise all relevant rights under copyright. Non-exclusive means you can still do whatever you want. So an exclusive license would be something that you give to a publisher when you publish, so they have all the rights. But here you give the University of California the rights that exist under copyright, but you still keep the rights to yourself as well. And for the purpose of making the student thesis or dissertations authored at the university freely and publicly available in an open access repository in any medium. So the open access repository, in this case for the University of California, is eScholarship. And I hope you are familiar with eScholarship because it's a great source of open access information published, created by UC authors. The policy at UC Davis is not quite implemented yet. So we are at the moment working on a workflow with ProQuest to get, and with graduate studies, of course, to get the full text and the metadata from ProQuest into eScholarship. Other campuses have this already implemented for years, and we are a little bit behind, but we are working on this right now. If your dissertation thesis falls under it, I'm not sure. It really depends a little bit, but you should certainly consider making them make them available open access. Open access has, of course, some benefits. Your work is way more visible than only on ProQuest. They're automatically on ProQuest, as you know, and but ProQuest is a database that requires a subscription, so it is limited to those people who have access to a library or have a subscription to the ProQuest dissertation database. Having your dissertation also on eScholarship widens the audience automatically to worldwide, basically. You can get usage stats there, and yeah, your visibility, the exposure of your work is much greater. Of course, embargoes still apply. So if you are not comfortable with that, if you want to put an embargo on your thesis, we'll come to embargo in another few seconds, then eScholarship will not, and so the ProQuest will not publish the full text of your thesis. So you can tell when you submit your thesis in graduate studies that you want an embargo for up to 6 years. I think that's the maximum. And there are some exceptions where you can have a complete embargo forever, but this is very exceptional. Then eScholarship will display the metadata, so the title and the year and your name, so that people know the thesis exists, and this is public information, so that's not there's nothing wrong with that. But the full text will not be available until the embargo is expired. And this is how it will look like in, here's an example from Berkeley. So you basically, the Berkeley campus has on eScholarship their own section. So do we, but we don't have any thesis in there yet. So you have a list of their electronic theses and dissertations, and if you click on the title, you get the full text and some metrics about usage and some metadata about the year and the top and discipline and all the rest of it. So keep this in mind. That's something that's certainly coming, and I encourage everyone to do this and give permission. Because of the UC policy, your permission is required, but there's also, it's hard to not to give permission, if you know what I mean. So they, you can put an embargo on it, but otherwise it would go in open access. And then finally, last but not least, we have some, or I have a collection of questions that I got over the time from graduate students in relation to thesis and dissertation, and sort of copyright related, but not always. But of course, first question, do I own the copyright of my thesis dissertation? Yes, you do. So automatically, when it's written, it's yours. And it's also yours, and it stays yours when it's submitted to ProQuest. So ProQuest doesn't take the copyright away from you or require you to transfer the copyright. You're still the copyright holder. That's why it is relatively easy for us to move your thesis when you sign the agreement to eScholarship. So we don't have to deal with ProQuest as a copyright owner. The next question is, should I register the copyright? Because the website, the relevant pages on the Graduate Studies Office is mentioned here. So you can register your copyright. It depends on you, and you might talk to your advisor if you should do it or should not do it. Registering your copyright allows you to receive statutory damages and funds for attorney fees if you need to initiate a copyright infringement case. So if you think somebody might take your thesis and publish it under, and not under a different name, they cannot do this. This would be plagiarism. That's even worse. But publish it under your name and make a profit out of it, you could sue them. But you can only sue them when you have your thesis registered with the Copyright Office. Or you can sue them, but you cannot sue for statutory damages. So this means like a estimate of damages, an estimate amount of money that you will sue for, and for attorney fees as well. The costs are, you can do this through ProQuest. You just tick a box there, I think, when you submit your thesis, and it costs $75. You can do it directly with the US Copyright Office on their website. It's relatively easy. It costs $35. I don't know where the $40 that ProQuest charged, the additional $40 go to. I guess to ProQuest company account or whatever. But anyway, so it's your choice. That it's not a huge fee, but you can consider if you want to do it. It's no harm if you do it. It's potentially useful if you do it, but it's not. It's also for thesis and dissertation. It's not necessarily that likely that you need to sue somebody, that somebody's infringing your copyright. Yeah, you are still the copyright owner without the registration. So that's for sure. Even if you don't register, you stay the copyright holder. So embargo, most of you know probably what an embargo is, but because I got this question from graduate student, what's this an embargo? I will mention this. So means your thesis dissertation is not publicly available for the amount of time that you that you put in your form. 6 years is the maximum, I think, here at Davis. Other campuses have different limits, different caps. And if you should do an embargo, it's up to you. Again, talk to your advisor. And there are different opinions here, to sort of competing competing camps about should you do it or not. Some say yes, you should do it in any case. Others say, well, no, it's not really necessary, and the exposure of your thesis, of course, is then not there, and nobody can read it. The reason that it's quite popular to put an embargo is if people want to use their thesis and turn them more or less directly into a book and expand it a little bit, edit it, and so on. And it's very usual in humanities. And in fact, the American Historical Society a few years ago, I think they made a big fuss about having thesis dissertations in open access. And they say, yeah, this is the basically the basis for the gold standard of publishing a book. And if it is publicly available, another author might just take the ideas out of the book and publish their own, out of the dissertation and publish their own book, simply quicker or whatever. And then you cannot anymore, because there's a prior publication on this topic already. And so you cannot. But question is how likely this is and how often this happens. So it's a little bit, it's a judgment call that nobody can really do. I usually send people to their thesis advisor and follow what they advise. So I cannot really say do it or do it not. And then another question that I very often get is if I can publish parts of my thesis or my whole dissertation as an article or book. And here, many publishers consider a thesis or dissertation not a prior publication, because it didn't go through the usual or through the peer review that an article or a book would go. And it's more, it's a work that represents research we have done, but it's also a work that that demonstrates that you can do research and that you can write about your research and so on. So it's a little bit a slightly gray area, but again, most publishers don't consider it a prior publication. However, and some publishers state so explicitly on their website. I saw this at Elsevier. I saw it in Sage, the Sage website. But some also said it's up to the journal editor to decide. So if you plan to publish parts of your dissertation in a specific journal, maybe it's a good idea to check their website or just contact their editor or representative and find out if they require that. There's a list of publisher thesis policy that my colleagues at Caltech have put together. There's a link. And down at the bottom, there's in the further reading, there's an article published last year where somebody did a survey, an academic publisher, and asked them if they consider e-thesis like a prior publication, and if they would still consider publishing content from the dissertation as an article and book. Most publishers say yes, they would do so, with a few exceptions, and a few journals have specific rules and policies. And the last question It's sort of the other way around. Can I use previously published research in my thesis and dissertations? So if you during your time as a candidate, as a graduate student, have published research with your advisor or in your team or yourself in a journal, published research in a journal article, most publishers allow you to use this material in your thesis and your dissertation. So that said, there are some exceptions, and here again, always check with the publisher's policy and find out if a particular journal, particular publisher will allow you to do this or not. Most will. So that's the bottom line. I think that's all. I have here some links to websites, web pages that give you a little bit more details because it was very quick, 40 minutes for a lot of information, a lot of text-heavy information, of course. So you can go to these pages and read a little bit further. As I said before, you can always contact me. You can always drop me a line, send me an email. Don't call me because I'm currently working from home, as so many, and I'm not in my office. I can access my voicemail, but if you don't leave a message there, then I won't get it. So send me an email. You can set up a consultation on Zoom, or sometimes it's just a quick question that I can answer in email. And I'm happy to talk to you. Having said all that, we have now a little bit time for question and answers, and I do the stop sharing, and I look at the chat, or if somebody has a burning questions, you can unmute yourself and jump right in. We have 58 people. I hope it will not be too chaotic if like 30 people at the same time want to ask questions. So yeah, I'm open to question. And meanwhile, I'm reading here in the chat if we have other questions that I can answer. Here's a question about Researchgate. Would it be correct to make available a publication article in Researchgate if such article is originally published in a non-open access journal? So Researchgate is a platform where you can upload full text, but I would not upload full text of the publisher's version of an article unless it is an open access article. So that's non-open access articles. No, you cannot, because by the agreement with the publishing agreement says that only the publisher can distribute the final version, the publisher's version of the article, and you have the right to put something, to send a copy to individual people, to other researchers, but you can not upload the full text of the final version, and not even Researchgate is it's a little bit a gray area because it's not really a repository, but they claim to be a repository. So even the final manuscript version, I would not upload on Researchgate unless it is you have permission, or unless it is an open access journal. But if you're on Researchgate, by all means, put in the record of your publication, put in the title and the journal and the page numbers and all this stuff. So yeah. If you put an embargo and publish your dissertation as a book before the 6 years are up, what happens to open access? If you put an embargo and publish your dissertation as a book, I think you can. No. So the embargo stays for 6 years unless, and that's a good question that I cannot answer 100%, but you might be able to require or request from eScholarship, tell them, forget about the embargo and make it open access now, because I have published this as a book and now I don't care, it can be open access. So I think that that should be possible. You have to do this in writing, of course, but only the publication of the book doesn't trigger the embargo to be eliminated. Where can I look for resources about copyright and licensing related to research code and software? That's another area of copyright. So software codes are also covered by copyright. So this is not patent laws like invention and so that kind of thing. But software and code is also covered by copyright, and resources about copyright licenses related to. You can go to the University of California Office of Scholarly Communication has a website where I think there's information about data management and so on as well. And then you might be able to get some information there. Otherwise, I would have to look this up. I cannot answer this now with a URL, but if you send me an email later, I can certainly look it up and find something. Can I upload full text of my published work, articles published to Elsevier and other publishing companies to websites such as Researchgate? Oh, that's the same thing. No, no. Specifically Elsevier and or the major publishers are not, they do not allow upload to Elsevier. I mean, they cannot prevent you doing this, but if you do it, they did this in the past and they continued doing so. They send notifications to Researchgate saying this is an infringement of copyright and please take it down. So Researchgate is taking the stuff down. Researchgate, interestingly, or Elsevier, interestingly, is suing Researchgate about their pure existence because they enable people to upload full text of copyrighted material. I don't know where this is at the moment and where it goes, but they usually, even if you are the infringer as the author, even if it's your own article, but you transfer the copyright, then you are also their author, and they don't want to get on the wrong foot with the author, so they choose to go after Researchgate and not after the author. But no, you should not do this, not the full text. If I draw a pic myself to referring to another pic, do I need to obtain a copyright permission? Oh, this is interesting. If you want to publish it, probably. It depends on how faithful the picture is. So if you copy a Rembrandt and it looks like a Rembrandt, then obviously it's not. But if it is like a cartoonish version of a Rembrandt picture, well, Rembrandt is out of copyright, so for that reason, it's not a good example, but contemporary painter, then you might get away with fair use because you have a different version of this particular image. But if it really depends on how faithful you use it or you copy it. If all the compositions and all the elements in the image are the same, it will be harder to make a case. If it's not the same, if it is the more different it is, the better. There's an exception, another exception for the copyright law. This is for another purpose that you can get away with fair use is parody. So if you make a cartoonish version of a famous painting, for example, then it's you can use it under fair use. So parody is heavily supported by fair use. Yeah. So let's see. Do I have anything else here? Does fair use apply to reusing my published journal papers within my dissertation or thesis? Are these slides available? So the slides will be available, and maybe you put this in before I came to the slide about reusing my published journal papers. So most, no, it wouldn't go under fair use. I think it's just because the publisher doesn't it doesn't consider a dissertation a prior publication, and the publishers are usually very, or most of them are very liberal in giving or providing permission for the author to use this material in dissertation or thesis. Yes. What is bright line? Bright line is the numbers that you sometimes hear when it comes to how many pages can I copy out of a book without infringing copyright, and put it on Canvas or use it for myself. And there are numbers that are flying around, as I said, like sometimes 15%, sometimes it's a specific number, 20 pages or one chapter or two chapters. And this is just made up. So that's not, doesn't have any basis on the law. So there is no clear-cut number or line that you can follow in order to decide, yes, I can use this much material or I cannot use this much material, opposed to the speed limit, for example. If someone has subscription of Shutterstock, using those pictures in multiple places like posters, PowerPoint flyers, would that also contain copyright? I think this depends on the Shutterstock image. I think they would tell you if what copyright restrictions are on the individual images. Some might be copyright-free, Creative Commons license, and you can do whatever you want with that. But citing or mentioning the creator is always the important part. And some might be restricted by copyright, and they might point you to copyright holder or something like that. So it's not because you have a subscription to them, you cannot necessarily use the material any way you want. The subscription means you have access to the material that they have. That's what you pay for. How much of my M8 thesis can I use in my doctoral dissertation? That's a good question. I don't know. You certainly can build on that, but this is a question I cannot. It's not so much a copyright question because you are the copyright holder in both cases. Then a question to the to your advisor and people who help you with your dissertation. I would refer you to them. Thank you. Okay, thank you. I answered this with my pleasure. I hope it was helpful. Let me see if I see anything here. Does fair use apply to reusing my published journal papers within my dissertation or thesis? Oh, I answered this already. So that's not fair use, but publishers allow that message. So I think if there are no more burning questions at the end. Do translators have copyright over their own translations? Yes and no. It depends on how they, what the translation is. So if this is like a paid job for a publisher, they might, the publisher might still be the copyright holder. But they are the creators of the translation, and they need to get permission to do the translation of a work if the work is copyright protected. So you cannot automatically provide. So under copyright, any derivative in which is, translation is protected under copyright, and unless you clarify this with the copyright holder, then you're not the copyright holder necessarily. Yeah. Generally speaking, now you need to fill out permission to use forms for archival materials for journal dissertations are published as open access. You still need to fill out those permission forms. Yes, about the permission form, I don't want to say much, and I cannot say much because this is more a graduate studies question. But as I said at the very beginning, we no, not at the beginning, but doing the open access policy part, we are at the moment working on a workflow to put this in, what forms students have to sign, yeah, well, how embargo is still possible. That's no question at all. You can embargo it, but how the form will eventually look like and what you have to sign and the language on the form, that's not finalized yet, but it will be on the graduate studies website. Any other questions? Wallace, do you have anything that you want to add?
Thank you, Michael. That was excellent. I just want to give a shout out that next Tuesday, the 26th, we'll have a how to file your thesis and dissertation seminar from 10 to 11. And if anyone has any questions about filing their thesis or dissertation, they can email their senior academic advisor in grad studies.
Okay. So then I click the leave button. Again, thanks for coming. I hope it was helpful. Contact me anytime, and enjoy the rest of your day then. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you, Michael.
Bye.